2025, being organized by ICMAI RBO in association with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. Thank you. Now, I would request CMA Dr. S.K. Gupta, sir, MD, ICMAI RBO, to please give welcome address to all the dignitaries present here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon and welcome to this online national conclave on valuation being organized by ICMAI registered valuers organization in association with Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India on the theme Profession and Practice of Valuation Vision 2025. I am privileged and honored to welcome Shri Ravi Mittal, Chairperson IBBI, as the chief guest for the program. And I also feel honored and privileged to welcome Shri P. Raju Iyer, President, Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and CMA Shri Videndra Sharma, sir, Vice President of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, also directors on the board of RBO of ICMAI as the special guests. I also welcome the speakers from India and abroad, Shri Manish Srivastav, Shri Shuvendu Saha, Shri Pavan Kothari, registered valuers, and Mr. Mugisha Allen from Uganda, the valuation professionals. ICMAI RBO has very close association with International Valuation Standards Council, and we regularly interact with them and regularly provide speakers to their programs, and their members regularly join our programs also as speakers. As we all understand, valuation is the crux and the pivot around all financial transactions happen in the marketplace, be it in any asset class, be it SFA or plant and machinery or land and building. And especially in the context of IBC, valuation is very, very critical and important, because if the valuation is not credible and proper, an unviable company might be revived, or a viable company might be sent into liquidation because of differences and because of problems in the valuation. At the ICMAI RBO, we are geared up to conduct various professional development programs. We keep doing such kind of programs from time to time with capacity building objective, and also for the purpose of ensuring that our members, not only our members, but all the RBs in the universe, they are able to accumulate the required number of continuing professional education hours, which they have to comply with. So in today's deliberations, we are going to talk about what is going to be the profession and practice of valuation going forward by 2025. Maybe there'll be some suggestions, recommendations also, which will compile and forward to IBBI after the end of this particular session, which might be beneficial to IBBI and other policymakers for giving for coming out with new regulations, new directions, and new policy matters going forward. So without taking much of the time, I would request the chairperson of IBBI, Shri Ravi Mittal, sir, to kindly share your perspective on the practice and profession of valuation vision 2025. Shri Ravi Mittal, sir, chairperson, IBBI.
So thank you, Guptaji, chairman, vice chairman, and other members of ICMAI. I'm very thankful to you for organizing this conference, and also for asking me to address you. Actually, I am still in the learning phase in IBBI, and especially about valuation, I am in the very, very early learning phase, because I have had very few sessions with valuers, and I'm trying to understand your concerns. I'm trying to understand how you do valuation, various problems associated with valuations. I fully agree with what you said just now, that valuation decides whether we will resolve a project or whether we will liquidate a project. And you play perhaps the most important role in ensuring that a project is resolved as a going concern. If you really ask me, you play a more important role than even the IP or the RP. And it is based on your valuation. It is really based on your valuation that everything gets done in the resolution process. Now, I would like to, address two, three points with you. My first point is you or your organization must be doing valuation both for the RP as well as for the RAs. RA is also will get valuation done before they put in the bids. So I hope that the two valuations are quite similar. So I would like you to consider internally and see if these valuations are very different as to how we can bridge the gap between the two. That is the valuation done on behalf of RA and the valuation done on behalf of RP. So this is the first point that I want to put for your discussion. The second point is, I have seen that in several cases there's really significant differences between the two valuations. Now there will be differences between in valuation. Valuation is not a science; it's an art, and valuation cannot be the same. But we need to value the same items. I have taken out a few valuation reports where there were significant differences. And what I have found is that one valuer, the opinion of one valuer is that this should be valued, while the opinion of the other valuer is this should not be valued. I mean, these items can be valued or these items cannot be valued. Now, I can understand that while valuing an item, we can have different valuation. But there should be consensus amongst us whether this item needs to be valued or not, or how it needs to be valued. So at least for IBC purposes, I want to take your opinion as to whether we should formulate some standards that these things need to be valued, these things perhaps cannot be valued. I mean, I don't know. So can we have some kind of a standard or some kind of a guideline whether we should help you in preparing your valuation? The third thing that I want to put up before you is, there is a valuation reports are prepared as per international guidelines. Now, if they are strictly prepared as per international guidelines, they'll come in a format. That is what I understand. But the valuation reports that I have seen follow different formats. Perhaps you follow different guidelines. Maybe, I mean, I have really not gone deep into it. But should we prescribe a set of format in which valuation reports are put up? Should we do that? And the format does not mean that it is a very strict kind of a format. The format could be a guiding, I mean, a model format, and you can always add and subtract based on the actual things. But should we prepare a format which will help you, or help the valuers in coming at a correct valuation? Should we do it or shouldn't we do it? I mean, that is one question I want your body to deliberate today or on any other day, and tell us how to go about it. The next point I want to understand from you is, at what stage in IBC should the valuation be done? A question arises that we do valuation at the stage when the project is admitted, but the bids come about 6 months, 1 year late. So according to you, at what stage should valuation be done? How much time does it take to do a valuation? And should we start valuation right at the admission stage, or should we start valuation when EOI is issued, for example? How much time does it take to value a standard? I mean, there are very complicated projects and there are very simple projects, but let's say to do an average project, because we should take a decision based on 80% of the projects. 10% here and 10% there will always be different. So these are some of the issues which have arisen in my discussion with you and other stakeholders. And I would be very happy if you can deliberate on some of these points or give me additional points, so that we can make valuation a meaningful exercise, and an exercise which will have its respectability. I mean, valuation should be no one should then question it. So what can be what are the various steps that we can do, and what we can do. So I would be very happy if you can deliberate on these issues and you can come to me or you can tell me in today's. I will hear what you are saying for the next 2 hours. I'll put myself not on video, but I'll hear everything that you are saying. So what should be done? Huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your curtain raiser kind of remarks where you have set the tone for the deliberations in today's afternoon seminar. Thank you so much for your kind presence and your encouragement in organizing of this program. Now, I would request CMA Vijendra Sharma, Vice President of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and also Director on the board of ICMAI RBO, to share his perspective on the theme of the webinar today. Shri Vijendra Sharma.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Respected Shri Ravi Mittal ji, the Chairperson of IBBI, Shri Sudhakar Shukla ji, the whole-time members of IBBI, Executive Directors, CGMs and other senior officials from IBBI, speakers from India and abroad, and rest of the viewers. Very good afternoon to all of you. The ICMA RBO is thankful to Shri Ravi Mittal ji, Chairperson of IBBI, to have spared his valuable time and joined this national conclave on valuation being organized by the ICMA RBO as the chief guest. Sir, we are very encouraged by your kind presence. The valuation referred to the process of determining the present value of the company or an asset. It can be done with a number of techniques. You rightly mentioned, sir, that the valuation is if insolvency is embodied, that valuation is the soul of it. Whether you go for a resolution or you go for a liquidation or asset or for a company, it is very, very fundamental discussion move around only the valuations. The analysts who want to place a value on the company normally look at the management of the business, the prospective future earning, the market value of the company assets, and its capital structure composition. Knowing what an asset is worth and what determines its value is a prerequisite for intelligent decision making. In choosing investment for the portfolio, in deciding on an appropriate price to pay or receive in a takeover, or making investment, financing, dividend choice, which is running the business. The valuation required under different statutes like SEBI, FEMA, Income Tax, IBC, Companies Act. Valuation play a very critical role into IBC resolution process to achieve its objective of all the stakeholders involved. To give the valuation asset is a very key factor for a informed decision making under the IBC. The registered valuer has a huge responsibility to carry appropriate valuation of the distressed company so that they can have they may be reviewed by the of the CIRP. Our very key objective is to be a transparent and have a credible determination of the value of the asset to facilitate the comparison and informed decision making by the committee of the creditors. To give the brief about our ICMA RBO, sir, the ICMA RBO is very active, engaged in the professional development of RBs, organized 110 professional development programs in 2021-22, sir. Our ICMA RBO is working on developing the best practice for RBO, sir. You rightly mentioned that it should be set, the standard format should be there, so that the person who prepared the report and the person who read the report should have the same sort of interpretation. And we are also having some sort of valuation standards, sir. Our RBO had developed a valuation standard board, and we are having the participants from the different stakeholders so that we can design some sort of best practice to be adopted by the RBO, sir. The RBO is very closely associated with the International Valuation Standard Council, sir, developing a nodal center for International Valuation Standard Council in India for supporting adoption of RVs and International Valuation Standard by neighboring countries, sir. The draft valuation bill will also give some impetus for the profession and the practice for the valuation in India, sir. So with this, sir, we are very thankful to all of you, all the participants, sir. Thank you very much. Over to Shri Gupta, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very encouraging words and giving a broad perspective, your thoughts on the theme of the webinar today. We now start the technical sessions, and the first speaker I would like to invite for deliberating on the theme, Mr. Shubhendu Saha, registered valuer. Mr. Shubhendu Saha, registered valuer, to make his presentation on the theme.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gupta. So I know the current theme is about IBBI and the valuations. However, my presentation, I have tried to look at the profession of valuation and specifically on the land and building listed valuation from a larger perspective. And the reason being that, of course, right now the context is about IBBI, which is the current regulator of valuation profession in the country for now. But as we all are aware that a valuers professional bill is in the works, the act is coming. And if you look at the market for valuers and valuations, there's a much bigger market that lies outside the IBC work. And as it happens with a lot of professions, there are a lot of changes which are happening in the macro environment, which is going to affect the profession of valuations in general. So the theme of my presentation is just to have a look at what are the future trends that are likely to impact the profession of valuation, and more specifically the land and building or real estate valuations as such. So right, so I'll just share my screen. Right, I hope my screen is visible to everyone. Let me quickly go through that.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So there are essentially two drivers of change that we can see as which is affecting valuation professionals primarily. One are the obviously technological developments. These developments, whether you speak about big data, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and specifically for valuers and real estate valuers, the automated valuation models or AVMs, which are impacting the real estate industry and the role of valuers therein. The other big driver of change, which is affecting the valuation profession, are the client expectations. As I mentioned, outside the IBC, the institutional investors and banks, even within IBC, banks are the biggest stakeholder here. So before anything comes into IBC, the banks would like the valuers carrying out their duty before they, and valuation becomes a very important part of their risk management and business decisions perspective. So from the valuers themselves, they are now seeking advice, insights on a larger long-term value in a very dynamic physical and economic environment. And before and as we speak about the bankruptcies and the insolvencies and the resolution of insolvent companies, the fact is that if the valuation exercises and the risk management exercises of banks are handled accordingly, so maybe there will be lesser and lesser needs of the bankruptcy proceedings, unless except for the physical and economic changes. And that is why the client's expectations on having insights on a slightly longer term value in a very dynamic environment. So if we take next steps on what are the key technological developments mentioned about. So in one of the publications by the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, they identified various aspects of real estate profession and the impact of technology. So if you look at the highlighted portion, the appraisers and assessors of real estate, which is where most of the valuers and valuation profession lie, that is likely to be affected more than 90% by the changing technological environment that we are in. So which is the biggest, the first and foremost change in technological advancements? One is the big data. Big data is essentially a name for very intense and very involved statistical analysis. As we all know, as valuer, when we are carrying out our exercises, data becomes important. And as Dr. Narayan Murthy had very famously said, "In God we trust, everyone else must come with data." So when we talk about data, there are three clear aspects. One is the quality of the data. The second is the sources of data, how credible the data is, and finally the processing of data, which is undertaken by valuers and every other across the asset classes to come about their opinions and the final estimates. And the big data is becoming a key basis of competition and growth of firms across sectors, as we all know. Of course, people who are in the business of sales and customer interactions and the more digitization that is taking place, there's a lot more data which is about consumer behavior which is coming out. So it's just not about B2C, but also B2B, wherein most of the exercises of valuers like us fall. And as a matter of fact, data can be leveraged very effectively for by a valuer to not only look at the present values, but also assist in predictive insights. And that is what the big data allows you to do. So this is one of the significant changes, or this would bring about one of the very significant changes in the way valuers are undertaking their exercises. The second important or significant change which is coming out is through a technology called blockchain. All of you around must have heard about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, etc. These are all based on a fundamental technology called blockchain, which allows transactions essentially to move from analog to digital, wherein all the records of a transaction taking place, and this transaction need not be just monetary transactions, it could be smart contracts, any contract uh, which is entered between two entities. Monetary transaction is one such contract, but there could be any such exchanges as it moves from analog to the digital area in a secure and transparent way. The blockchains have the potential to drive one, transparency and trust. The reason it can drive transparency and trust is because the records of transactions are extremely decentralized, and which makes them much more foolproof to tampering. Now, what blockchain does is, because it is so dispersed and decentralized, and the uh, chances of tampering with the data being less, any access to the information becomes a lot more credible. If you remember, in the big data, three issues: the quality, source, and processing. So the quality of the information, the source of the information becomes very, you can say, credible. Then there is what blockchain can deliver is portability of valuations, which means that there will be consistency and objectivity of valuations across institutions. Just now, Mr. Mittal spoke about how the valuations between two values can differ and is going to differ, but as long as there is a consistency of principle and there is an objectivity around these things, and the clients are aware of how those uh, valuations have been arrived at, so blockchain can deliver that particular consistency and objectivity of valuations across institutions. So if you are valuing an asset for one particular bank or institution or for one particular purpose, then if the basis of that valuation, which is the data that has been utilized, is very credible, then the same valuation can be utilized across institutions and across purposes with whatever adjustments that may be required from a situation to situation perspective. Artificial intelligence and linked to artificial intelligence are the automated valuation models. Now, as we all understand that what artificial intelligence does or claims to do is to perform a task in more efficiently, essentially undertake data analysis, as well as undertake certain activities in a much more accurate manner than, say, if a human tries to do it, as well as in a much lesser time. Now, as far as real estate or land and building valuations are concerned, the European Association of Appraisers have found the automated valuation models currently a tool for all stakeholders in the residential property market. Now, as you all understand, that residential is the asset class within land and building, which is the largest asset classes. But as artificial intelligence develops, the AVM models would also evolve further so that their usability can expand towards different property types and complexities. The reason it is currently being used primarily in the residential property market because there is a lot more data which gets thrown up because of the transactions in the residential market, especially in the developed economies. And as the real estate markets and land and building markets evolve further, and specifically in case of India, where the land market become increasingly transparent with digitization of land records, etc., the AVMs themselves would have a lot more usability across these asset classes. Now, having said that, the AVMs, unlike the threat that say robotics might impose on certain type of manual labor, uh, AVMs are unlikely to replace the valuers in toto, and what is most likely to happen is that the valuers need to upgrade their skills and their understanding to recognize in what situations AVMs would be most appropriate and effective to use, and in what situation they need to rely on alternative models. In other words, AVMs would be an assistance for a valuer because at the end of the day, valuation would always remain an opinion. AVMs leveraging on artificial intelligences would do a lot of data processing and give you certain inputs, etc., which the valuer would need to build their insights and opinions around. The second driver of change, as we mentioned, was about client expectations. So before we set into client expectations, it would be interesting to understand the dynamic environment that a typical client of a valuer operate in. And these clients are largely financial institutions, institutional investors, as well as banking clients, and also to an extent large, say, listed companies who have the obligations to report the valuation of their assets uh, publicly because they are publicly owned across. But largely, the institutional investors and the banks are the key clients for any valuer, and specifically for land and building and real estate valuers. Uh, as you all are aware, that currently there is a significant war on talent which is taking place. I mean, if you talk about any industry, specifically the high-end industry like IT, etc., you must be hearing about how the attrition rates have suddenly gone up. And what it is doing is that as more millennials join the workforce, their requirement of workplace and and their own lifestyle is, is driving significant change in which our built environment is also changing. And if the built environment is changing, the how a valuer perceives and analyzes that change and incorporates in the valuation that the valuer is supposed to provide, that is also going through transformation. Related to talent is this whole concept of gig economy, a word you most of you might have heard about, where you do not have uh, uh, a sort of appointment to retirement sort of a job cycle, but you're working simultaneously on multiple jobs, or maybe working on short-term mandates according to your own skill sets and the requirement of the market. And if that is happening, it is again changing the way the workplaces, specifically the commercial real estate part of land and building or real estate, how those offices, etc., are going to change. Uh, Increased digitization has led to more and more customer data getting stored electronically, digitally, which and is making data a very, very valuable asset. And as happens with every valuable asset, security becomes a very critical aspect. So if you understand and what it is also doing is, uh, suddenly requirement of data centers, which are significantly going up. So that digitization linked to a newer type of asset classes emerging into the market with their own uh, issues related to security. Fintech, which is now changing the face of financial services industry. And if you're talking about institutional investors and banks, as far as valuation clientele is concerned, if fintech is disrupting banking businesses and banking models, by corollary, it is going to have a transformational change on the valuations also, because if the client is going through a paradigm shift, there is no way that the service provider is not going to face that impact. E-commerce, as it has happened, it has drastically changed the way we buy things and shop. The need for warehousing, retail, those things are significantly changing around. The need for mobility, specifically in urban context, is increasing and is also changing nature. We have cab aggregators like Uber, Lyft. You have electrical vehicles. You have self-driving cars. The nature of or the need for which people need their mobility services, that is changing. If we talk about EVs, the requirement of charging infrastructure, etc., is significantly changing the demand and need uh, for land and building. And consequently, if there is a demand for land and building, there will be demanding of financing. And as a result, there will be a need for valuations, and to understand these changes and demand for such newer asset types which are coming up becomes very, very critical for the valuer. Demography. So demography is not only changing with the new millennials in the workforce, but is also changing for a country like us, where in next 20 years we would definitely be aging. There is going to be migration, out migration, in migration, and of course, given the state we are in last 2 years, what we have seen is how the social and the economic inequity has been changing. Now, all these have a very significant impact on the built environment. I mean, if we understand the question of affordable housing, the question of senior housing, all these asset classes. And so, for example, today, if there are buildings and there is built environment which is being developed to cater to a certain type of demography, and if that demography is going to change significantly, then what is the impact going to be on the valuation? Now, that is the question that the clients are likely to ask the valuers, and they have to uh, dwell upon those questions. Last but not the least, the issue of climate change. This is impacting everyone and anyone. You must have heard of concepts like green buildings. I mean, India is a signatory to COP, and as a result, uh, and a lot of large developers and asset creators are committing themselves to improving, reducing their carbon footprints, and incorporating sustainability in their day-to-day operating as well as strategic decision making. Now, the traditional model of valuing an asset, how is it going to incorporate these these dynamic changes? That is the challenge which the valuers are facing as far as client expectations are concerned. Now, just to summarize how these things are going to impact value, first is the sustainability and value. I've spoke about climate change. So, how can a sustainable real estate from an environmental perspective affect property values? Now, if you look at the way the valuations are carried out, it's more like looking into the rear view mirror, because you look at empirical evidences, how the transactions have carried out, etc., and based on your analysis and intelligence, you come out with a certain value, because historically transactions have been happening around certain prices. Now, historically, you won't have buildings which are that much sustainable. These buildings are going to come up in future. Now, how do you take into account that aspect? Because the transactions have yet not taken place, but if the building or any of the assets which are more sustainable, be it buildings or be it any other business which is this is driven by environmental sustainability. So the valuers are required to have an intelligence and build right data sets and collate information so that they can critically evaluate and analyze those data points to arrive at a more informed opinion around the assets which are going to get impacted by increased sustainability issues. The second aspect that the clients are seeking significant input from valuers is on the question of long-term values, right? Especially post 2008 financial crisis that the world faced. One, and also last 2 years when you had a black swan event like COVID, how the short term solutions is still easier because you can still sense how the things are changing. But if we talk about land and building, which are long-term sustained assets, etc., what is it that in long term the impact on the valuation is likely to be, especially when the financial markets are likely to be significantly volatile, as we have seen in last few years. So how to even if you are not in a position to predict the cycles, but how to analyze and come to a conclusion on the impact of those cycles, and looking at various data points to see as the likelihood of those cycles appearing, not appearing, and to incorporate their impact on the value, if not on the value that you're giving as of the specific date, but to advise the client on the sustainability of that value. That is going to be one of the very critical expense from the client, and that's how the valuers would need to evolve their understanding, their knowledge, and their skill sets. So what is likely to be the way forward? First of all, I think there is going to be a significant transformation evaluation process. So currently, the valuation process largely works according to this. If you look at it, typically there would be a pre-valuation process, negotiation, the terms of engagement, etc. For IBC cases, obviously there is a law, there is a regulation framework which is already there as far as terms of engagements are concerned. But outside that, also typically you will have an agreement with the client, which is also very well captured in various valuation standards. Then one most important part is the investigation and research. So what you do, you carry out market research, you carry out physical inspection. If you're valuing a physical asset, you'll do it. If you're valuing a business or a financial security in which there is some physical asset underlying or any other physical asset driving, you would do and go ahead that inspection. Inspection might also mean looking into the financial statements, etc., of the entity that you're trying to value. You would look at the property yields if you're valuing the land and building, or you would look at various other financial benchmarks which are available in the market. And you would, as far as investigations are concerned and research is concerned, you would also look at a lot of data which is available in public domain, whether available on freely or on payment, etc. Right? It's central to all this current valuation process is the client. So after your investigation, you typically go ahead and do data handling and interpretation, which is nothing but collation of data, analysis of the data, and arriving at certain conclusions, which then gets captured in your deliverable, which is essentially a valuation report, which will capture the value as well as the rationale to arrive at those value, a description of all the analysis and the conclusions that you have drawn out of that. Now, this is the typical valuation process that is followed right now. What is likely to happen is there's going to be subtle changes and very transformative changes, which will take place in each of these modules. For example, as far as the uh, contracting is concerned, most likely there would be smart contracts, which is between the client as far as the valuer concerned, because this has a serious impact on the question of liability of the valuer as far as that report is concerned. So that the valuation deliverables are used and referred to in the proper context. In the investigation, when we spoke about collation of data, etc., big data gathering and statistical analysis through artificial intelligence would start taking precedence. And using big data and blockchain, there would be a lot more easier diligence and verification of that information that the valuer would be able to do compared to the situation as of now. For example, if there's a fixed asset register, if there is a lot more digitization, either using blockchain or using artificial intelligence, the verification of that list of fixed assets would be far more efficient and effective. Followed by that, the data handling and interpretation, whether it is analysis, whether it is doing some predictive insights out of it, if we are leveraging on artificial intelligence as well as your AVMs, that would make the exercise by the valuers that much more cost effective as well as efficient. And finally, the post valuation process reporting, the ability of the valuer to provide either a valuation range or give a very informed opinion on the long-term value that we talk about, or the risk associated with the value that has been given on, the quantification of that risk, that might become rather a standard deliverable as far as financial institutions are concerned. Finally, what are the future imperatives for the valuers that are likely to come place? One is the statistical analysis. The valuers going forward need to equip themselves with a strong understanding of statistical analysis. Otherwise, their ability to interpret results which were thrown off by big data engines or AVMs or artificial intelligence engines, that ability to interpret that information and come to an informed conclusion, that would get hampered. With the statistical analysis, the next step would be AVM engagements or involvement. The statistical analysis would be important so that the AVMs do not remain a black box. One is able to understand the output that the AVMs are throwing out. Because at the end of the day, any machine learning is garbage in and garbage out. Now, to figure out what is happening with all the inputs in that mathematical model or in the automated valuation model, one needs to have the statistical analysis. And once, as a valuer, there is enough of knowledge and skill set to undertake that statistical analysis of the data, the interpretation of the results from the AVM. And if you remember in the previous slides, we spoke about the skill set that the valuers have to develop is where is it appropriate to use the output from the AVM and where is it would be required to rely on an alternative model. So the AVM engagement would be critical along with the understanding of statistical analysis. Strategic insights is something which the clients would look for very, very intensely. That is going to differentiate the top of the line professionals from the other average professionals in the market, and even from a standard valuation inputs increasingly. And as Mr. Vittal spoke very clearly that there is an issue about when should the valuation be done, whether at the time of admitting the claim, admissions of the case, or when the bids come across. But the fact is that if we have these statistical tools, etc., with us, and as it evolves, the uncertainty around these questions would go away, because even if you are valuing at the time when the case is getting admitted, and if you are able to give in your reports certain insights about the plausibility of change, risks because of the economic environment in that same deliverable, the IRP and the community of creators might be in a much better position to interpret the reports and make an informed decision, even if there is a delay in the resolution applicants coming in and the resolution process to actually start happening. And finally, environmental sustainability. I mean, you cannot get away from there. Every building, every construction. I'm sorry, there is some disturbance coming on the line. If I would request, if you're not speaking, if you can put this on mute.
Muted, sir. We'll get it muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anyway, I'm towards the end of my session. It was for the others. So, environment sustainability we spoke about, because if we are even if we are talking about intangibles in businesses, given how pervasive the issues of climate change and environmental changes are there, every asset is vulnerable to it. Every asset, whether it is a physical asset or a financial asset, because the financial asset also has some underlying businesses or underlying physical asset which is driving the value of the financial asset. And the environmental sustainability is going to impact everyone. So this practically going to be how should I put it, every professional at some level needs to be very, very sensitive and should be able to comprehend the impact that it is going to have on the assets that they're going to assess and value. So I'm not saying that people have to become environmental engineers to practice as valuers, but a certain level of deeper understanding of how the changes are taking place and how a certain measure, whether in a business or whether in case of physical asset, is going to make progress towards environmental sustainability, and therefore its impact on the value of that particular asset would be very critical for the valuers to practice their profession. And by this, I come to the end of my session. Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on the emerging trends in future for the valuer professionals.
Thank you so much, Mr. Suvendu Shah, registered valuer, for sharing your perspective and giving us the way forward and the perspectives on what the registered valuers of today and future need to be ready about and need to build their competencies in those areas, so as to be, as what you mentioned, as the top of the line RVs. I mean, there is going to be a clear distinction between the people who are going to rely upon these and focus and build capacities on these emerging trends, and the people who are going to be probably left behind. So thank you so much for your very useful deliberation. Kindly stay with us. We are also going to have an interactive session towards the end of this webinar, and your inputs and observations during those interactive sessions will also be quite useful for us. Thank you so much. I would now request Mr. Pawan Kothari, registered valuer, to kindly share his perspective on the theme, Practice and Profession of Valuation Vision 2025. Mr. Pawan Kothari, please.
Thank you, Mr. S.K. Gupta Sarji. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, and a very good afternoon to all of you senior people present here from IBBI, from ICMI, and all the senior fellow valuers. I will be sharing some of my ideas only. I mean, like on the topic of Vision 2025. It may look some sci-fi thing today, but I believe really that this kind of things may happen in time to come. So, and I welcome all the discussion or any question or anything, like sir also said at the end of the presentation. So we'll have that. Once again, it's a great honor and pleasure to be to have this platform and to have an opportunity to share my views on what kind of future is there in terms of valuation, what exactly will be there or what could be there in time to come for valuers, as well as how valuations will happen. I really believe in this one quote, which is story behind the numbers. I mean, every time we see that ultimately a banker or a client or a fellow valuer as a expert advice from us, ask that what is the value? Tell me that one number and I'm fine. I don't want to listen to everything else. Is it coming to is it coming near to my expectation or not? But like IBBI chairman also said here that at times the valuation is different from different valuers, and the difference is what story the valuer is seeing. I mean, today we see a lot of startups being valued much more than the established companies which have a lot of asset base. It is all because of the story. So if there is a story of growth, there is a story of scalability, there is story of huge profits in time to come, the numbers become really different. Even if there is a loss making venture, or even if there is the venture is just an idea, or only at a stage where it has just reaped some revenue, not even profit, I'm saying, just reaped some revenue, even then valuations are in billions, right? Vis-a-vis when we see as a land and building or plant and machinery valuers, especially, that if there is asset, only then there will be value. So at some point in time, I believe that story behind these numbers is really important. I would like to present with this idea in mind that these two pictures, I mean, I would like your answers also on the chat box. Which one of these pictures do you think is true? In the first picture, a doctor is telling an old man that, boss, great news, you are pregnant. In the second one, the doctor is telling a young lady with a bum that, that dear lady, you are not pregnant. Okay. I believe you will all agree that both these cases are wrong. I mean, sorry to take this kind of example, but it touches me in the sense that it is really linked to our valuation field. When our client has expectation that my asset is valued so much more than what you are giving, and our banks or financial institutes, or when it goes into liquidation, people says that why you have valued it so much. My question or my point here is that both these scenarios are wrong, and how these scenarios are related to us is, even if we do undervaluation or overvaluation. I mean, case one is undervaluation, or case one is overvaluation. I mean, whatever that old man do, he won't be able to get pregnant. And the second case is like undervaluation. The asset is very likely to produce a great revenue in future, but because it is undervalued, it won't get financial aid, and there is a loss of opportunity which can be there. So, I mean, I see this as false positive and false negatives. And every time we get these kind of assignments and questions and these kind of challenges where we are asked to give so much value, and so my suggestion or request is that we should stick to the right valuation. Whatever story we feel is right, whatever numbers derived from that story we feel is right, because valuation is all about, ultimately it is an opinion based on certain data, based on certain insights, based on certain analysis. Like the earlier speaker also suggested that with a lot of big data coming in, with a statistical analysis and sustainability of whatever valuation we are giving is really important. So in first case, what will happen is we have wrongly assumed and given a higher valuation. So what will happen? Higher funding, and finally it will become an NPA. While in the second case, if we are super conservative, and we are not able to see the future, because valuation is all about future. I mean, it is all about what kind of future benefits we can reap, or that business or that asset can generate. So now, if we are not able to see that, and if we are always be super conservative, if we always follow a super conservative approach, then we and our client or financial institute, whoever is funding, or a VC, they will all lose an opportunity and funding to a asset which is very, very good. Now, let me also take you through one example or one evaluation, what has happened, especially in terms of the transactions. Because like SK Gupta ji also said in the starting, that financial, ultimately valuation numbers sits into the financial decision making, that if the valuation is so much, ultimately a transaction will happen or will not happen, right? So what has been the story of transactions? It started with a barter system when in the very, very early stage. Then gold became one currency where it became a standard thing, standard metal to be exchanged for anything that you want to buy. After that, when it comes to kingdoms and all, metal coins, earlier it was gold coin, then silver coin, and then normal steel coins and copper coins came into picture for exchange, and they become as the first currency. When it become really bulky, that it was really difficult to carry tons and tons of coins to do a transaction, paper money came into picture, and paper money still exists. But what's happening now in the recent past, as well as what is going to happen in future? Plastic currency, electronic money, and we are moving towards cryptocurrency, where we are not even where we don't even know who's the producer, who is the taker, but we are trusting a lot on technology, right? Like Mr. Subhendu also suggested that one of the main parameters is technological development in big data. So now in today's day and age, we are relying a lot on technology, and technology at a click, we are able to do transactions. So this is what has happened from barter to cryptocurrency today. Similarly, in transportation, we started from a wheel, and today we are discussing about driverless cars, right? We have not stopped here. We want to go beyond. Today, we are talking about not even land, air, or water. We are talking about space travel. I mean, you all know. So these things have happened over a few decades. But today, in the field of valuation, I believe that this may come even faster. If you all see and imagine, from the start of your day, we are interacting with a lot of gadgets, lot of tech-enabled tools to support us in doing transactions, in doing our work, in connecting with people, in also doing even day-to-day normal works. So when these things are changing so fast in almost all the industries or almost all the verticals, Valuation, I believe, is no different. In valuation also, automation, AVMs, digital analysis, big data will definitely come. It is up to us how we take it and how we can utilize these to be able to use in automation of valuation, or you can say how can we make more sense and standardize some of the valuation practices using this AVM tools. So what is AVM? I just want to share one definition which I believe is AVM is a technology which is capable of simulating the work of a valuer to an acceptable degree of reliability for a certain purpose. Now, AVM today, the more data we supply to AVM, the better it will become. And AVM is a tool. Like today, when we go to a doctor, he will do a physical checkup, but definitely he will ask for a lot of reports. AVM is like a report for a property, and valuer is like a doctor. So whatever inputs we give to AVM and whatever results are there from AVM, we can do clinical diagnosis from AVM, and we can, based on our opinion, based on the experience of the valuer, he or she can decide what kind of result AVM is hinting towards. So that's where AVM becomes really, really useful and really handy. So as to help as a tool. Now, there are, in terms of inputs or in terms of the factors that we need to consider for AVMs, are not only standard factors like your location, GPS, GIS coordinates, your size, and etc., but also political, social, environmental, legal, and technological factors. So what do I mean by these kind of factors? So, for example, political factors, if there is a stable government, the economy will boom, whether it is of one party or another. But and if there are any changes at the global level, there is some background noise coming in from someone's.
We will mute it, sir. We'll mute it.
Economic factors like Delhi and Gurgaon, one very good example that economic growth has happened so fast that there was a time when exponential rate changes were coming in. Today also, after COVID, in some of the tier 2 cities, in fact, in some of the growing cities, rates are changing by the day. Land rates in the market are changing by the day. So economic development and infrastructural development makes a lot of difference in valuation. Social and social surrounding. So if in a township, if there are all lawyers, advocates, IAS, government officials are staying, oh my God, the value of that township will be extra. You will have to take some extra valuation for that. Technological adoption with the changing time. Then legal, if there are any policy related to tax, related to health and safety, related to any laws, it also impacts the valuation. So, and environmental issues. So if we are able to somehow quantify these factors, it will become near to real valuation from the AVMs. I would just like to share what are some big steps, or what are some of the steps which are used in automated valuation models. First and foremost important thing is that what is the source of data and lot of data. So if I have only 5 data points in a community, in a township, it will be difficult for me to project valuation of the 6th plot. But if I have 10,000 data point from the similar township for a different periods, it will be much easier using statistical analysis to be able to produce near reality results from a machine, from an algorithm. Then second important thing is what kind of location it is. What are the geo location? What are the risk factors? And then comes, with all these data and location and this inputs, then comes your model and analysis. It is like a machine brain. I mean, you can say instead of human brain, machine is putting in its brain to be able to analyze your inputs so that it can give you some intelligent information. Rather than only a number, it can give you intelligent information. By intelligent information, I mean some kind of trends, that what kind of future does it see for this particular society or locality. Like Mr. Subhendu also mentioned that it is important to see strategic insight. The valuers who are able to give strategic insight will have a differentiated place in eyes of client. Similarly, here if we are able to get, just imagine if you are able to give some good input to a developer, that instead of developing a high rise here, if you develop a super luxury villa colony in a particular area, you may earn more, right? And if your predictions, if your analysis is right, you can make tons and tons of money, as well as you will be able to give very good advice to your client. Okay, so those kind of inputs and those kind of outputs we can expect from algorithms and AVMs. Now, why AVMs are better and to what extent? See, obviously, because it is a machine, it will have less error, given that we don't give garbage data as input, obviously. And there is no inbuilt bias. Every plot is same for the machine. Okay, and it saves time, of course, because it is much faster. It is with the today's computing power, the kind of process or the kind of analysis that we can automate is very fast. Then we can get more and more information to our clients, like trends and all, and it will be very objective. Now, can AVM replace a valuer? Today, as of today, no, but to certain extent in time to come, it is possible that for a lot of valuation, for a standard valuation, like we were discussing, there was a point of discussion that should we have a standardization of formats and all. So for standard valuation of a plot, there can be 80 to 90% automation using AVMs, but still some of the things like professional inputs, quality related inputs, if there is any renovation and all, or cognitive factors, this has to be evaluated by a valuer in today's world. Maybe in future, this can also get automated with image recognition and some more development in artificial intelligence. I would also like to share one more thing. I believe I have 5-7 more minutes. So let me just share one more thing, which is where all in today's date AVMs are being used across the world. So AVMs are generally useful when we are doing portfolio valuation. By portfolio valuation, I mean, let's say there is a township and there are 500 plots. For every plot, you want to have a valuation. So in that kind of a scenario, what happens is a lot of factor will remain same: the connectivity, the infrastructure, the distance from the nearest school, college, hospitals, all these will remain same. But what will change is whether it is a corner plot, whether it is a park facing plot, whether it is a east facing, south facing, north facing, all those things will change. So in case of portfolio valuation, it is very, very useful that you give input, all the inputs for one particular plot, and you give what kind of changes or what kind of comparison you would like to do. It can give you valuation of all 400, 500, whatever number of plots in the nearby vicinity based on the input that you give very, very quickly. Some of the financial institute and big hedge funds and all are also using it for mortgage as well as securitization. So how secure is this property? How good is the mortgage? So based on that, they can increase or decrease the rate of interest. Risk management. So for example, an institute like a big bank or a national bank can give a valuer risk management assignment, that what is the kind of risk that I'm taking, or what is the kind of risk exposure that I have in a certain area. So if there is a high risk, I mean, after a certain percentage, if let's say almost all the properties are being funded by that particular institution, there is a red flag. Also, it can be used for review and monitoring of their strategy. So I'll give you one example. Germany at a national level is using 60% of standardized residential property valuation being done by AVMs. Okay. One more thing I would like to share is, I believe that if we as human bring in human intelligence and technology brings in that automation and computing power, we will be able to make better decisions for tomorrow, faster decisions for tomorrow, and more reliable decisions for tomorrow. So with AVMs, it becomes like technology plus human intelligence will give us better decision making power. This is one thing that I believe will come into picture sooner or later, is that valuation of property will more become like credit rating of an individual. Okay. And it is possible that in future there will be one card which is associated with a property, and as soon as you tap that card, it will give you what is the value as of today. And it may fluctuate, that tomorrow it will be this much, yesterday it was this much, and in future what are the prospects. There could be something like that, as soon as you input a property ID, it will give you all the information about the property, when it was sold, what it was sold, or how much is the area and stuff like that. And once we have a lot of inputs for that area as well as for this property, it is possible that we will be able to give the valuation to the accuracy of 95+% versus the market value or versus the standard DLC value. So I hope this will trigger some points for deliberation, and this is all from my side. Thank you for your patient listening. Hope that our valuation field will excel like other fields are excelling, and we as valuer become a part of financial revolution the country like ours is needing in this point of time. Thank you so very much once again to IBBI and ICMAI and all the fellow valuers for listening to me. Thanks a ton.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pawan Kothari, for your very, very elucidated presentation, covering wide spectrum of your thoughts and perspectives with regard to emerging trends in valuation and the vision for the future 2025. Thank you so very much. We now have Mr. Manish Srivastava, registered valuer. Mr. Manish Srivastava, kindly share your perspective on the theme of the webinar today.
Hello, yeah, very good evening to everyone, and to respected Chairman IBPI Ravi Mittalji, Vijayan Sharmaji, and SK Guptaji, and to our dear all experienced valuers sitting over here. And so when we look into like emerging trend in valuation, the most critical aspect and the question that being there is, before moving into valuation, we need to understand like how the business dynamics is changing, where the world is moving. So if we able to understand the business, if we able to understand the sense of the business, like how the business dynamics is changing, then accordingly we can make changes in ourselves. We can make changes in the model that we look into. Like the time where we are sitting in, this is the most, like I would say, the emerging time, and where this is the time which is changing very fast, and there's a paradigm shift that is happening in the business, like other speakers have told, like Pavanji as well as Subhenduji, like so much of the things are changing. There being the automated valuation models that been coming there. It is nothing like going to be like just relying on the naked like the valuation methodologies, like the asset approach, income approach, or market approach. There is more of the understanding that need to be looked into. So if I say that valuation is not only about numbers, it is more important about the theme, the storyline, how the future is going to roll out. If these being the factors that being analyzed by the valuer, then it always be, he will able to see that what is beyond, or what is the light after the dark tunnel is. Okay. So at times, this is the time where we are sitting, the things are moving very fast. And when I talk about like valuation of startups, how to look into what is the methodology, most of the methodology, like conventional method, if I talk into asset method, if I talk into comparable method, they actually fail. We're never able to derive the value based on these methodologies. It is only about like how you perceive as a valuer, how you look into like what is going to be the roadmap is. And once we understand the business dynamics more, we always be in a better position to place the things and understand the things more. The most important critical aspect is when we say valuation, it is about like the data that we have. So everybody is talking about like the big data that is going to take place, and that is a lot of the analysis we can draw out of that big data. But the question is, whenever any sort of the assignment the valuer get, the type of the questions that we raise, that creates a difference between the valuer. It may be like, I may be asking like, you provide me these 3-4 information. I will draw the valuation and provide you the valuation report. They may be, instead of just asking the question and on the financial terms, it's always better to talk to the management, understand their perspective, what is the way forward they've been looking at, what is the picture they have been looking at, and what is the future they want to carve out. If these answers we able to get from the top management, then we always being in a better position to look at the broad daylight. So if I talk about the valuation professional, this is something like a sunrise segment which been there, because now everything they've been required a valuation. For any of the transaction that been there, they need to an arm length price, and there being the requirement of the valuation that been there. So now there being the thing like the valuer bill is already being in place, only required the parliament nod when it becomes an act, and then there will be the National Institute of the Valuer that will come into picture. So this is the profession which has actually evolved in our life. We've seen like how it has actually moving from there being the time where there being only like the wealth tax valuer, then there will be the chartered accountant who become the valuer, and then there being the registered valuer which come into being. But still, there is a long way to go. It just being the starting point, I would say, for the valuer. So from the valuer, for many of the valuer, what is most expected is in this unconventional time, in this time of uncertainty, we need to look into like a lot of the scenario analysis, lot of the real options thing, rather than the pure play like the equity valuation. We need to look into the scenario. We can look into the sensitivity analysis, and that these are the guiding things which can help us understand based on certain probability factors. There may be certain times which people talk about that on the qualitative side, there may be certain factors, like everybody talk about the automated business valuation methodologies. But if I look into, when I say valuation is an art and a science, I believe that it's more of an art rather than a science, because anybody who being a graduate or a person who pass out an MBA, he is knowing the method. He knows like, okay, these are the various approaches to valuation. These are the method to valuation. But we need to look into, like, when we move ahead 15 years, 20 years down the line, then we see that, okay, valuation is not only about numbers. It is more about understanding, more about qualitative factors. I place an example, very nascent example, which give an insight. Suppose there being two companies, one being run by a person who is 75 years of age with no succession planning, no son, no daughter. And a similar company with the same set of numbers, same dot by dot, balance sheet, P&L statement, everything same. But this being run by 3 professional directors. Now, if you look into the automated valuation model, it will provide you the same set of numbers. It will say that, okay, these are numbers are same, so the value should be the same. But the question is, if you look into something happens to a person with 75 years of age with no succession planning, in just a small fraction of time, the company will die. So we need to understand that at the end of the day, it should always be an art rather than a science. The more learning we derive, the more experience we get, we able to appreciate the things more. And that is one of the core function that we need to look at. And then we need to another understand that what is the premise under which we're doing the valuation, what is the standard of valuation. Of course, with the time to come, as you know, like the banking industry, the fintech has changed the landscape in which we do the transactions. If I asked you a question, like in the entire one day, how many times we exchange the currency notes and how many times we make the Paytm payment or any like the mobile payment, we at times feel like maybe in a particular week, we have just exchanged the currency notes once or twice. That is how the dynamics of the business have changed. So we need to understand things more, and it being a learning curve now, and we need to understand business sense more because the business itself are changing. There's a fintech company, there's a robotic science company, there's an artificial intelligence company. I cannot just go and apply the numbers based on anything. I need to understand their segment, the industry. We need to understand their report. So it's all about like how much deeper understanding we develop, and based on the deeper understanding, be able to address to the market. Okay. There may be time, I would say, that there's a disconnect which happened, like whether price and value, are they one and the same thing? There are so many of the companies which have gone for the IPO, new age companies, and you see like they're not able to test or pass the litmus test. And a lot of the companies, they not knowing like why the value has fallen so much. There's a one-third erosion in the value from the IPO price. Why these are happening? It may be like whenever we see like any sort of a transaction that happens, and when the private equity investment round happens, we always believe like, okay, whatsoever the price at which the transaction is happening, that is a fundamental value of the company. But that may not be so, because that may be something, the notional market that may be created. It may be like when it go to the real test, going into the IPO, that may not able to survive. Because so we need to look into another question is like whether as a valuer we have all the things we able to perceive or see like what is going to be the future is. The only question is we can have the understanding based on the greater amount of the data we get from the management, greater insight we get from the management. And one thing for sure, this information is coming from whom? This information is coming from somebody who has been sitting as an assistant manager level, is saying, okay, just I collected the 10 plus. Whether those data that you are receiving being received from the top management or not, that is again a question point. So whether the role of the valuer is only to look into like, okay, what is the projection is. So based on the projection provided by the management, I've been just looking and seeing that, okay, based on this projection, the number should be this much. That is not the pure role of the valuer is. The role of the valuer need to be, I need to have the certain amount of degree of due diligence. I need to understand like whether the numbers that the management is projecting, whether those numbers will actually able to survive in the market or not. If we able to go through all this a little bit more due diligence, we able to look into, then we'll be in a better position to look at the things. Okay. There being the time when there used to be the physical assets. Now there's, I look into like cryptocurrency, all these things happening. There's more like, instead of the physical asset, everything is moving on the intangible side. There being a famous saying by Mr. Narayan Murthy that at 9 o'clock in the morning, the value of Infosys comes, and at 6:30, the entire value of the Infosys goes away. The question is, he's talking about what? He's not talking about the stock market price. He's talking about the human capital. He's talking about like what is the value of the human capital or the chain is. Okay. So these are the important. Another aspect is there being a concept called metaverse that's been there, and everybody is talking about metaverse. Like I may be a person who been sitting here in New Delhi, and I wish to enroll into the Stanford University, and I want to like go for any degree course. It is not being required for me to go all the way to the US and then get into the class. It may be like I may use, there may be the use of the technology, there may be use of virtual reality. I just place that particular equipment in front of my eyes, and I feel that I've been sitting in the Stanford class and the professor is in front of me. That is the thing that is happening. And from physical to the virtual world, there, I believe that at times I feel I have an apprehension that I may be a physical person, but I may be 90% I will be digitally known rather than on my physical presence. So that is the time where with the advent of the technology, with the usage of the technology, the things can move very fast, but we need to understand how the technology is moving. What is the role of the technology? When I say blockchain, of course, blockchain talks about that the authentic data that is flowing, but whether when any company using the blockchain, what is the impact on the valuation that is happening? Whether it has a value creation or not. So that these are the imperative things that we need to understand and look into, and that is the roadmap that been there. So I believe that, of course, the time we have spent till date, this being the time where we were working on the conventional side. Now this being the time we need to upgrade, and everybody need to upgrade ourselves. Like we go, like when a child is born, he goes to the school again. This being the learning curve that being required, and so much of the reading, so much of the understanding that being required, and that then only be able to do justice to whatever we are doing. Another question at times being raised, like by a lot of people, you have carried the valuation, but after a certain period of time, the company has become bankrupt, the company is not able to perform. Then there may be the question point from you that you carried the valuation exercise, so you have done something wrong. I would say it is not the answer to be given. The question is, if I had carried the valuation, I have carried it on a particular day, and on that particular day, what are the assumptions that we have taken? What are the factors that being present at that point of time? Because everybody can talk at a later point of time, but at that point of time when we carried the things, what are the data points that being present, under which scenario we valued it, all those things only. So you can always justify that this is what being present at that point of time. But after 3 years down the line, something gone bad, it is not the role of the valuer to say that, yes, he is not a management guy who's running the show. I've been just been validating your business things. You've been running the show. You as a CEO or the CFO been running the show. I've been not running. I've been looking into certain assumptions based on logic, based on assumptions. We've been doing the evaluation. So personally believe that it is at the end of the day, the experience of the valuer which is going to create a value rather than most of the automated models. Yes, of course, we need to look into what are the things that is available, what are the gadgets that being available, what are the softwares that being available. They can be of ease to us. But we cannot sit and relax and say that, yes, Mr. Manish Srivastava or any person has done the evaluation based on the automated model and that being the report that being issued, because automated model will never able to going to take the responsibility factor. I signing the report, I can have to take the responsibility, yes, under my cautious mind on certain logic and certain assumptions, I carried this valuation. So of course, it's good to be part with the technology. It's good to always go hand in hand with the technology, but I will always be a supporter that yes, the experience plays the role and the learning skill we always need to enhance. And that is that. So these are the basic things I would just like to place, and I will not take much of the time. So this is all from my side. So thanks for giving the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manish Srivastava, for giving a wide diaspora of perspectives and personal views on with regard to the vision for valuation for 2025. Now we have Mr. Alan Mugisha, a valuation professional from Uganda, member of International Valuation Standards Council, who is going to share his perspective regarding practice and profession of valuation vision 2025. Mr. Alan Mugisha, please. Is Mr. Mugisha there?
Mr. Alan Mugisha, you are requested to please unmute yourself.
Please share Mr. Mugisha's presentation. I see my secretariat. Please share his presentation.
Sure, sir.
Mr. Mugisha, you may start your presentation, please. Mr. Mugisha is in a meeting, probably. He has requested for 10 minutes time before he joins with us for his presentation. Anyway, in the meantime, we can open the house and have some interactive session and questions. We have a few questions already in the chat box. One of the questions, and I will request all the experts here to try and respond to that, is who should do the valuation of software purchased by a manufacturing company? Should it be by the SFA category RB or should it be by the plant and machinery category RB? Who should do valuation of software purchased by a manufacturing company? So I would request any of the speakers to kindly respond to that, please. Any views on that, please? Mr. Manish Srivastava. Mr. Shubhendu. The question is, who should do valuation of software purchased by a manufacturing company? Should it be done by SFA valuer or should it be done by plant and machinery valuer?
Can we participate? Participants?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, sir.
Thank you very much. Actually, I am also a member of the Tangible Asset Board of International Valuation Standard.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
This is Shandip Kumar Dev. Well, yes, it is all over the world. It is accepted that the softwares are actually the intellectual property, and this is nothing but the license, right?
Okay.
So until and unless it is there, the licensing is not there. It is when you are purchasing a machine, then it becomes a part of the machine. It will be done by the valuation, will be done by the plant and machinery valuer. But once you have to renew the license, the renewal terms is there. There is no question of valuation by a plant and machinery because this is not a tangible asset. Then it becomes an intangible asset and it would not be valued by any plant and machinery valuer. That is the concept which is there all over the world.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, sir, for your expert input. Any questions from the participants, please? Any other question? There is a question regarding what's happening on the Valuers Bill 2020. Well, all of us have the same information that the matter is currently pending with the government. As soon as something comes out in the public, then only probably we would all have the information. But as of now, nothing is yet known with regard to the status of the Valuers Bill 2020. Similarly, with regard to the valuation standards, as mentioned in the Valuation Rules 2017, the government has constituted a committee to look into and formulate valuation standards, the Indian National Valuation Standards. And it is believed that the committee has submitted its report with some draft valuation standards, and these are currently pending and under deliberation with Ministry of Corporate Affairs. That is the status as of now for that matter. One of the key issues that we are facing in the marketplace, especially in the context of IBC valuations, is that when the two valuers are appointed to carry out valuation, we tend to get two different values. And sometimes the variation is very, very significant, very, very high. I mean, so I would like to have an input and expert views for some of you participants, please, as to why does this happen? And then how do we try to minimize the range of the values that the two valuers get when they're assigned to carry out valuation under IBC? Mr. Dev, your views, please.
You are looking for my opinion?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah. Actually, you see, if the two valuers, the question is that whether the first thing has to be seen that whether the two valuation report both the valuation report or the valuers have followed the standard or not. That is the first question.
Okay.
It is found that both the valuers has followed the standards. That means basically they have used the the evidences properly, use the proper methodology, use the proper approaches and methods. Then there is very little chance that two valuation reports will vary to a large extent.
Okay. Okay.
But if the standard is not followed properly, what we have found in most of the cases where there is a large difference in value between two valuers, it is found that the valuers are not following standard. Basically, they are not giving any, evidence, proper evidence. So always they are telling, in my opinion, this is the value. If that is so, there is every chance of a big gap between two valuation reports. So what has to be done? The very first thing is to check whether the two valuation valuers have followed the valuation standard or not. If that is so, there is minimum chance of being there being a difference in value of more than 10 to 15%. It's not possible.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Possible. But if it is not followed properly, there is every chance there will be a big gap between two values. And valuers will say that we are correct. When a third valuer will come, how do you know that he is correct?
I know.
But further big gap between these two and the third one.
Yes,
so
sir. Yes.
very first thing is to see that whether the standard is properly utilized, whether the evidence that has been used by the valuers are proper or not. So if you ask me, my opinion is that there should be a panel of specialized valuer. If such type of big gap happens, these reports could be referred to them so that in future they can give their opinion on the reports. But once the two valuers report there is a big gap, the third valuer is appointed is not the solution. I'm telling you, it cannot be a solution.
I know. Yeah. So what we also find is the report submitted by different valuers, they're given in a different format or a different template. So can there be a possibility for standardized template or a format for a report? What is your experience at the IBSC, the international level? Is it happening in other jurisdictions?
Yeah, actually, you see what is given in the very fast introduction of the IVS. The IVS has said, IVSC has said, the valuers can use any format of their choice, but whatever format they will use, they have to, when they are expressing that this valuation report is in compliance with the international valuation standard, then the minimum basic international standard should be followed, right? But what you have said and what the chairman of IBPI has said, for the convenience of everybody who are, checking, I should say, we are using the valuation, the RVOs, and I should say that not a single RVO, but all RVOs together, when all RVOs will come together, when there is a common format released by the IBBI, then it will be definitely, it will be beneficial for the end users. What is suggested by the chairman IBBI is absolutely correct, because if there is a format following the international valuation standard, then it will be easier for the end users to check the valuation report, whether everything is properly covered and standard is maintained or not. So therefore, from this conclave itself, I believe that you can give a suggestion to IBBI to create a committee. That committee will create a common format for all kinds of valuation, and that format under the heading of methodology and approach for different asset classes, valuer will give different kinds of methodology and the approach that they are adopting, and the calculation portion may be different.
Okay.
The format for all the asset classes should be the same, where they will discuss about they will follow all the international valuation standard norms. That be beneficial for all the end users. But it should come from the IBBI, not from a single RVO, but IBBI. Let them create a small group, a committee. The committee will create the format for all the values. That is the suggestion. Thank you.
Any other views, please, from any of the participants or the speakers on this? So two issues thrown up for discussion. One is, what are the reasons for variations in the values given by two valuers? And second, should we have a standardized format of valuation report? Any comments, any observations by any one of the participants or the speakers, please? You're most welcome.
Sir,
good evening, sir. This is Kameshwar Rao.
Yes, please. Yes.
Suresh Johar.
Yes, sir.
I feel that as per the rules, guidelines has been given that the valuation has to be done by the valuation standard, if developed by the committee, or maybe if it's not been done, then it should be an international valuation standard and all. And in India, in the present circumstances, ICA, Institute of Chartered Accountant, has developed their own RV standard as such. And whereas ICMA is following international valuation standard. So why not the IBBI with the help of all the RVO can take care and take the matter with the government to set up as early as possible, activate the committee for creation of valuation standard as a whole, so that it will help in conducive to the standardization of not only the valuation report as such, maybe other issues also. Thank you, sir.
Sir, this is Kameshwar Rao. Can I put forth my views?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please.
See, under IBC, the valuation is done by valuers for any class of assets, which cannot be reviewed or anything by IP or IRPs. They have to accept the value as given by them, which is their own prerogative, each valuer. See, the question is how much difference it can come. So now the IBBA is coming with an amendment. If there is a difference of 25% in the valuation, if the two valuers, then value should appoint. As regards the format, already the contents of the valuation reports are prescribed in the valuation standards, both international as well as ICA valuation standards also. See, in that case, because the valuation is done by as an individual valuer who has got a prerogative to write his story, because as Mr. Pawan Kothari has already mentioned, the story depends. Not only the figure that is given, it depends on the story that is given behind. If you give a standard format, nobody can give any story. Simply like any other format filling, they will give some values there and give the conclusions and the method followed simply they will give, which is not correct. In my opinion, no format should be prescribed for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with regard to the timelines, IBC prescribes certain timelines within a valuer is required to be appointed as well as for the submission of the report. Do you feel practically those timelines are okay? Or can we do a better job if the timelines are slightly differed or slightly changed or altered? What are the views of the House here, please? Any views, observations on timeline prescribed under IBC for valuation, either from the speakers or from the members present in this August House?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, please. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, actually, I am of the view that because due to the timelines like appointment of valuer, there is always a dilemma because in the first month IRP is there and then RP takes over. If there is a change in IRP and RP, like IRP does not continue as an RP, then it is very difficult who should appoint a valuer because there is a timeline. You should appoint the. So there is a bit problem.
Okay. Okay. So what is your recommendation or suggestion on this?
So I think it should be mentioned whether RP should appoint the valuers or IRP because because at times what happens ki COC does not take the decision of changing an RP within the first board COC meeting.
Yes, please.
Then IRP has to appoint because as per the timelines.
Okay. 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 One of the other critical issue being faced by valuers in the IBC matters is the lack of required information.
Right.
In all asset classes, probably you would have faced this kind of problem. So what is your suggestion? How can we best go about carrying out the valuation assignment with whatever information we have, or what is the better way of accessing information which is required for carrying out valuation? Lack of availability of reliable, adequate information is one of the key challenges being faced by valuers in the IBC matters. So how to deal with this kind of situation? I would like to have some views from the members present here in this August House, or from the speakers. Anyone, please.
Sir, I am.
Yes,
sir, good evening. I am Amir Hamza from Chennai.
Yes, sir.
Sir, as per regulation, appointment of valuer within 7 days from the appointment of resolution professional or 47th day maximum.
Yes.
And there is another regulation says that if IRP has to perform the functions of RP till the RP is appointed, there is a regulation. So if the RP is not appointed, the IRP has to carry out, appoint the valuers and carry out the valuation process. That is regulation says. So there is no confusion on appointment of valuers if the RP is not appointed within the stipulated time. So before 47th day, the valuers have to be appointed from the insolvency commencement date. That is my submissions. It will clear the doubt of madam.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I also have one suggestion.
Yes, please. Yes, sir.
May I speak? Sir, I am Sushil Bajaj, calling from Faridabad. I am a registered valuer. in the capacity of land and building.
Yes, please.
What my observation is, most of the time of RP and IRP is wasted calling quotations and all that. So if there is a fixed fee chart, maybe fixed by the IBBI or NCLT, so any valuer which is available near to the asset class, near to the asset of a company, can be appointed on a fixed fee basis. That will reduce a lot of time in calling quotations and other things.
Okay.
Is it possible?
I mean, that's your view. We need to look at the views of the
Yes,
other member also, but fine. I've taken a note of that. And at appropriate forum, we'll definitely consider and deliberate about this particular issue. So the challenge of lack of information or inadequate information being available in the case of valuations under IBC, how practically you are dealing with these kind of situations?
Can I answer, sir?
Yes,
Dr. Gupta, I'm Riazuddin, Qazi Riazuddin.
Yes, please.
Sir, this is a really practical problem because whenever a case is referred by interim insolvency professional, he or she doesn't have the full information, and the staff of that of the company may not cooperate with all the data. Some figures are available, they are in PDF form, certain documents are there which are not signed, certain information right up to the date of declaration of CRP process, till that it is not even authenticated. So you have to take whatever value, whatever information is given by IRP or RP, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, think it that yes, although it is unsigned, unaudited, whatever it is there, it is in PDF form, it is and it is not accessible. And once again, you have to key in all this information in Excel sheet. It is by itself keying in another time-consuming process. So these are the practical difficulties while dealing with insolvency professionals. So this is the biggest challenge. What Dr. Gupta has mentioned, it is a challenge which we have to come across, and we have to go with whatever is possible. We'll have to do it, and we probably will have to make a mention in our report that so whatever figures we have relied is, it is given by IRP or by RP without any audited or without duly authenticated by the staff or the management of the company.
Fine. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we have the international speaker with us back now. He had some technical issue. So 10-minute presentation by him before we wind up our webinar today. So Mr. Alan Mugisha, are you there? Mr. Alan Mugisha.
Sir, due to some technical problem, he is not able to join the meeting. He has not joined yet.
Okay, that's okay. Not able to log in. Fine. So anyway, so any more observations or views of the members with regard to the problems, issues, matters concerning valuation?
May I come in, sir?
Absolutely, please.
Sir. I agree with you what Professor Sajuddin has said regarding the availability of the information within short span of time initially. Whatever the information is available provisionally, the registered valuer can qualify in the sense, can give a provisional report based on the information, because ultimately this report is to be used when the quotations, maybe tenders are invited from RA for proposal as such. Right. So there is always a gap between when the appointment of registered valuer and the usage of that particular report at the time of inviting quotations or maybe plan from that. So that time can be practically more utilized, because at that time, within this time, it has already been decided whether IRP will be continuing as RP or new RP will be appointed. Then they will be in a very authentic situation to get the more information from the company as such, to provide the better quality of the report later stages for to be used for the RA purpose as such.
Right. Thank you so much. Mr. Mugisha, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Kindly start your presentation, please. We've been waiting for you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Gupta. I'm sorry I've been late. I just had connection issues. I'm going to request Dr. Gupta to guide us through the slides. So please, the first slide, if you don't mind. Okay, yeah. So sorry, you can go back to the first one. The first slide, please. Okay, so thank you. So we're going to be talking about the vision for the value for 2025. And in that discussion, I'm going to talk about, Doctor, the second slide. Yeah, so I'm going to be asking a question whether there is room for the traditional valuer. Then I'm going to be throwing some light on what I'm calling the new dawn for 2025. And then I'm also going to be talking about the client of the future. And then I'll climax my discussion with what I think we should do as a body of practitioners. Next slide, please. So in my view, ladies and gentlemen, the traditional valuer is a kind of valuer who was trained and has remained adamantly or mentally in the realm of fixed assets, the fixed traditional methods that we know all about, comparables and DRC and the residual method and income method. The fixed curriculum from some of our tertiary institutions, the fixed time frame within which we tend to think and start things, and then also the fixed market, where we think about markets that are only within our area or within our confines. Next slide, please. So in my view, ladies and gentlemen, the period of the fixed minds for the valuer are gone. And the reason that this becomes important, especially for the Vision 2025, is number one, what I call the COVID undercurrents. All of us suffered almost 24 months of a totally disrupted global economy that had far-reaching repercussions in terms of how we think, how we behave, and how we consume. These repercussions are likely to have a lasting effect. The problem is our valuers are aware and open to the fact that this may change some of the way markets operate, and also may change the way some people or the way markets appeal to certain asset categories, and therefore we may need to adjust our methodologies and our outlook towards such valuation. Sadly, hardly had we dealt with the effects of COVID-19, then we had the huge economic wars, and that have in some instances turned out into real wars. In Europe, it looks like a war between Goliath and David and Goliath, but we all know that this war is going to suck in if it has not yet sucked in a lot of going all the way south of Europe itself, Russia, and even Asia. This is a war of resources. It's also a war of markets. It's a war of control of globally value chains. So this has got to obviously have an impact, ladies and gentlemen, on valuation. And I'm hoping that such forums at some point start discussing these impacts. In my view, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to slowly move away from valuing assets that like we had in the past, like land and buildings separate and plant and machinery separate and so on and so forth. We're going to get more and more faced with the valuation of going concerns and businesses. And this obviously changes a lot of the traditional methods that we have been using. The question is, are we ready as practitioners? Are we ready as people who are training valuers for the future to have this outlook? And if we are not, what should we be doing? Technology and intellectual property is increasingly becoming prominent, except the adaptability of this in many economies is still very low. And this is something we can't avoid. Even right now, we are speaking on the platform. If we are supposed to have been together for this meeting, it would have involved an air ticket, it would have involved a tour company, a transport company, a hotel somewhere, a catering company, and so on. But all these businesses have been cut out by this kind of virtual meetings. What impact has that had in terms of value of those assets that were traditional, and what impact has that had on value of the technology itself, if you can think about it in that way? Borders are breaking down, customers are purchasing from all around the world. So when you value, you don't value for India, they value for Asia, they don't value for, and so on and so forth. So because the market is no longer the people who are near the asset, it is everyone else who has access and consumption of that product. So brands and labels don't know borders. They transcend borders, and therefore the value of the future should be able to have that. Biological assets are becoming more and more prominent, especially with the effect of climate change, and as the global agriculture becomes more prominent, including tourism. So therefore, I need to know the price of an elephant, for example, as a tourism asset, or I need to know the price of a forest as a climate control asset. And these valuations are going to become important as we go ahead, so that we need to, and therefore we need to prepare for this. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in my view, it's also going to change. The client of 2025 and beyond is going to change. People will stop asking for for spot values. They'll ask for trend values. People will not ask to stop asking for present value. They'll start asking for forecasted value. Some people will start asking for historical value. The question is, do we have enough methodology for all this? The clients are also going to start asking for options for them to grow wealth. So they won't be asking you only to assess how wealthy they are, but they'll be asking you to advise on how to grow wealth and which markets to go into, which sectors to go into, and which assets to keep, to hold, and so on and so forth. Are you as a valuer trained in that kind of area? And if you're not, then what do you have to do? Valuation, like I mentioned earlier, it's not going to be by territories anymore. It's going to be by the far-reaching markets beyond cross borders. And therefore, if you're a valuer in Uganda, you should know what's happening in Kenya, what's happening in Tanzania, in Ethiopia, in Egypt, in South Africa. And if you're in India, therefore you should know what is happening in China, in Pakistan, in Singapore, and so on and so forth. So our should broaden our views because our markets are becoming bigger and bigger. Then component valuation is going to become less and less. We're going to start looking at brands and businesses which are really not about components of a business, but the overall impact and utility that a product has and the appeal that customers have for it. All these are slightly a bit more complicated than our usual calculations, that therefore we need to be good to understand. The last one under the client of 2025, ladies and gentlemen, is that the environment, in my view, and social value are going to become a little bit more prominent. People are going to be asking about what is opportunity cost of development, and what's the opportunity cost of preservation of the environment, and what's opportunity cost of society being cohesive rather than the ultimate strict reliance on capitalism only as a basis on which to determine value. Next slide, please. So as I conclude, therefore, I just have a conversation I want to share with you on what I personally think we should do collectively. So one, I think like we are doing right now, we should intensify interregional collaboration through our various voluntary professional organizations like ICMI. Also try and unify the principle as much as possible. The more the globe becomes localized, we need to start setting standards that are similar. And therefore, I call upon standard regulators to start making, creating a platform where we start unifying some of the pillars of our practices. We also need to broaden our practice space from local to global. So it shouldn't be you strictly tied into the Indian market. And I call upon practitioners to think about how to spread their wings out to learn as much as possible, and therefore be able to smoothen and prepare for future challenges from the more advanced markets. Also, I think with the challenges coming ahead, we need to be a little bit more multidisciplined. So a good valuer should also some law, a good valuer should know some finance, a good valuer should know some modeling, a good valuer should know some ICT, a good valuer should also know some economics, such that you have a holistic mind that can give a holistic opinion. And for this one, I charge tertiary institutions and practitioners to look out for more knowledge and not stay in their silos. We also need to try and focus on urbanization as a true and a monumentous global movement that's not going to turn backwards, and prepare for that challenge in the future and what impacts it has on demand and supply of the constantly scarce resources that we have as a global community. The environment also, as the growing numbers, is continuously becoming challenged, and therefore we need to convert what is left of nature into an asset for its own preservation, such that it can start competing with the other assets that would be of alternative use. For instance, if we have a forest for which a municipal governance is trying to convert into a housing estate, can we then can someone lease it and use it for tourism and can compete with other uses, such that we don't see sports of nature preservation as areas that are redundant, but we also see them as commercial pockets that are of value. And then obviously we should also focus on the SDGs, such that we have a common goal as a global community. And I call upon policy makers in this regard to do what they can to make sure that we have a unified focus. Second last, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important that we create a global research agenda, which will guide all the efforts that we are putting in. If we are researching on technology, let that be so. If you are researching on land usage, let that be so. If you are researching on impact of urbanization, let that be so. But one thing at a time, but based on a priority, we need to get the whole globe moving on a particular pace, such that when we lay brick, the foundation is laid permanently for the future, rather than having several scattered efforts in different parts of the globe that end up meaning nothing collectively. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, it's high time that we all make a decision to invest in big data so that we can aid the application of AVMs. Technology is the future, and I think there's no way we can go around this. So I call upon governments and states to think about creating projects that will leave behind big data that can be used for valuers for making making decisions that can later be depended on by various sectors for development. I thank you very much, and I hope everyone has had a good conference today. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mugisha Turiahikayo Alan, for joining us and sharing your perspective at the macro wider level. You have huge international experience, and that's why you were able to share the very, very broad macro perspective with us with regard to the future and the vision for the Valuer Profession 2025. Thank you so much. So with that, we come to an end of this particular program organized by ICMAI, Registered Valuer Organization, in association with Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. It's my privilege and honor to thank the Chairperson, IBBI, the whole-time member, Executive Director, Chief General Managers, and other officials of IBBI to have been associated with this particular program and having spared their valuable time and encouraging us to do this program. I also thank all the speakers who have presented their perspectives and their views with regard to the theme of the program. I'm also hugely thankful to all the participants who turned out in big numbers, over 200 participants that we had in today's program. And it was a great interactive learning session for all of us. Whatever points we have come across, whatever interactions have taken place, we're going to definitely take a note of the same and take them forward by way of discussions, deliberations at various fora, at various levels. And thank you very much, all of you, for joining us all over again. My special thanks also to our ICMAI RVO Director, CMA Vijendra Sharma, Vice President of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and duly patronized by the President of the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, and also the Chairman of ICMAI RVO for their continuous support and encouragement in organization of various programs of professional development. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. क्या खाया आज? और खाया नहीं?